Okay, moving on. I am going to create a production report using the weighted average method in this lecture. I'm definitely going to start with the PowerPoint slides, and I'm going to continue on with the example that we've been talking about in the PowerPoint slides, and just sort of want to point out, I'm not going to go through the detail again, but I do want to point out the steps, right? So again, the first step is we're going to keep track of the physical units. We're trying to figure out how many we need to account for and then reconcile that with what we've accounted for. Once we've got a good handle on the physical flow of units, then we're going to calculate the equivalent units. And remember, it's usually the ending work in process where we have to make some calculations. Anything that's been transferred out is only transferred out if it's totally complete. All right. Once we've understood the equivalent units with respect to both material and conversion costs, then we're just going to add up all the costs. And then we can compare step 3 with step 2 and determine our cost per equivalent unit. All right. Then once we have the cost per equivalent unit, then the last step is we can create the financial statements. And we therefore apply the cost per equivalent unit to the units that have been transferred out. And then we apply the cost per equivalent unit to the units that remain in work in process. And again, we are breaking out direct material and conversion costs. Okay. So in this video, I'm hoping to kind of put that entire process together. And I'm just going to use or do one of the homework questions for us. It's question 9 in chapter 3. So this company, Oslo Company, produces large quantities of standardized product. Okay, so whatever it is, the following information is available for the first production department, meaning if we were making peanuts, it was the roasting of the peanuts. Or if we were making peanut M&Ms, it was that first division. Okay, they give us some information. In this particular instance, we have some units that were sitting on the the production floor on January 1st. We then put into production 19,000 units, and then we completed 18,600, and we still have another 5,800 to complete. Then we have a bunch of costs that we've also incurred, right? And now we're trying to figure out, okay, of the total 725,000 that we currently have, right? The most simple way of thinking about it is, if I have all of these costs, and again, the total costs that we are going to try to account for, 725,809, 725,809, sorry, that should be a comma. How much are transferred out to some other division and how much remain in ending work in process. Okay. And this entire process is to try to figure out this bucket and this bucket. So we're going to follow this 5-step process. Let's do the first step, which is physical flow of units. Physical flow of units. I'm going to go down to the production report. Okay. And this section right here are the physical flow. So the units to account for, that's beginning balance. And maybe I'll try it this way. Beginning work in process, and then I'm going to add or things that I started during the year. And so we were saying the beginning work in process was 5,400. And the number of units that we started during the period is 19,000. And therefore, total to account for 24,400. Now, just like we were saying, these are either going to be transferred out, completed and transferred out, completed and transferred out. That was strange. Maybe it's asking me to put completed and transferred out, or it's still in ending work in process. And I think they gave us some information. So we completed and transferred out 18,600. 18,600. And then how much is left in ending work in we can back into it, but they give it to us 5,800. 5,800. And I know that I'm on the right track because units that I have to account for equals the units I have accounted for. Okay, now step 2. I'm going to do the equivalent units of production. And I'm going to go back to our question. Equivalent units of production. Remember, we now want to deal with the units that we transferred out and the units that we're still working on. We are accounting for the 2 buckets. So completed and transferred out and ending work in process. Okay. Listen, if we completed and transferred it out with respect to material and conversion costs, it's 100% complete. Otherwise, we would not have transferred it out. Sorry about that, but it was somebody at my door. Okay, so completed and transferred out. We just said we were going to account for 18,600 units. Okay, let's just stick with this. With respect to material, these are 100% complete. Otherwise, they would not have been transferred out. With respect to conversion costs, they are also 100% complete. Otherwise, they would not have been transferred out. Okay, ending work in process. I have 5,800 units. Okay, let's go see what they're saying about percentage complete. With respect to material, okay, my ending work in process is 100% complete. So let's go and drop that in there. With respect to material, my ending work in process is 100% complete. Okay, conversion costs. With respect to conversion costs, my ending work in process is 35% complete. Therefore, with respect to ending work in process, we are 35% complete. And therefore, the total conversion units of production, 20,630, and that's different than materials number of units of equivalent production because everything is finished with respect to material. We're adding everything at the beginning of the period, and then we're evenly working on converting the material into something that's ready to be transferred out. And at least with respect to this bucket, we've only made it 35% of the way there. Okay, now we're doing step 3. The cost, let's just account for the costs. Okay, again, I am going to account for all the costs that I had on hand at the beginning of the period, and then I'm going to account for all of the costs that I added during the period. Now, the costs that I had at the beginning of the period, my material cost, 4,279. So 4,279. The costs, my conversion costs at the beginning of the period, again, this is all the beginning work in process. So the beginning work in process conversion costs are 9,138. 9,138. Again, conversion costs, beginning, work in process. Now we can do the same thing with the costs that we added during the period, right? We added two buckets, material, and then we added a bunch of costs related to conversion. So the material costs that we've added, 317,800. So cost added, 317,800. And now let's go try to figure out how much conversion costs have we added. And we added, again, I'm going to go costs added this period for conversion costs, 394,592. 394,592. Okay, then I am going to determine the cost per equivalent unit, and that's the total cost divided by the total equivalent units. So up here, we just said my equivalent units for material, 24,400. And therefore, $322,079 in total costs with respect to material, beginning plus what we added, divided by total units complete, $13.20 in material costs per unit complete. Now we could do the same thing with conversion costs, right? We said the equivalent units of production in step 2 was 20,630. So type in 20,630. And then we've got $19.57. And that is the function of all costs with respect to conversion, 403,730, divided by the equivalent of 20,630 completed units for a total of $19.57. Whew. Okay, now we can really start to back into this. Now we're going to take that 725,000 and we're going to put it into transferred out, this bucket, or it's going to remain in ending inventory. We're doing that last step right here. Let's allocate all of the costs to one of those two buckets. So go back to the question. Okay, completed and transferred out, cost assignment. How many equivalent units do I have with respect to material that was completed and transferred out? Man, this is where it gets confusing. But again, I'm looking for direct material that were completed and transferred out. So, direct material completed and transferred out. Direct material 100% complete, EUP 18,600. So 18,600. Now, with respect to conversion costs, how many equivalent units did I complete and transfer out? With respect to conversion costs, completed and transferred out, 18,600. Makes sense. We transferred out 18,600 and they were both complete with respect to both of those. Okay. So what is the cost per equivalent unit for material? That was 1320, we said, right here. And then the cost per equivalent unit for conversion, we just said that was $19.57. So now we've determined that of the $725,809, we are saying we've assigned 609,522 to completed and transferred out bucket. So I'm just going to write that down. 609,522. 609,522, which means I should, when I'm done doing the same thing for ending work in process, I should get what is 725,803 minus 609,522. Okay, I should get 116,281, right? Both of these are going to add up to 725,803. So let's see what happens. Okay, let's do ending work in process. All right, the number of equivalent units of production in my ending work in process would be, here are my direct materials, ending work in process, 5,800 units. And then the conversion costs, ending, equivalent units of production in my ending work in process. Okay. So again, conversion costs, equivalent units of production, and then ending work in process. So I have 2030. 2030. And therefore, the total cost that we have remaining in ending work in process, 116,287, which was 116,287. Yeah, not bad. I think I might have written a 3 there, but it should have been a 7. 725,809 is what we accounted for, and 725,809 is what we have to account for. So again, my unfortunate scribbling is 725,809. That is a 9, right? And if I subtract 609,522, it would be 116,287. Interesting. What did I do wrong here? Okay. All right. Let's work on it together. Let's go back to 609. So the total cost that we are going to account for, 725,809. 725,809. Let's just be clear that this is 725,809. And then the first one we reconciled was 609,522. The total amount that we said that was in completed and transferred out, 609,522. 609,522. Okay, let me just work on my math again. We're good. 116,287, right? My math was right. And 116,287. All right, so even I'm getting confused with all of the different spots where these numbers go. Okay, and again, I will just remind you that you can do this problem or you can follow along with me, but you're not really going to grasp the concepts 100% until you start doing these on your own. So expect a little bit of growing pains in this chapter.